So I just want to show you guys why big government is really bad for the small business owner. Take this as a case study, not something that is like a one-off story. Cause my dad also at one point in his life had a bakery, and he came across similar incidents. Like when the government starts regulating everything, if you open a small business, not only do you have to pass through health inspections and quality control and all these things that cost money in order to get, and all this paperwork that you have to do, but there's also hundreds of small regulations that you need to take account for. And big businesses, and I'm talking like supermarkets and big corporations, they usually have the money to hire a team that make sure they can keep up to date, that make sure that they are in compliance with all these small regulations. Meanwhile, the little business owner has to figure all of this out by themselves, and they end up with the potential of receiving really high fines, like 25,000 euros fines, for something that's absolutely ridiculous. So in this case, for example, this German baker, because he wrote kilograms with capital letters instead of kilograms with small letters, he was warned with getting a 25,000 euro fine. Uh, Usually 25,000 euros, at least in my country, is the price of the bakery itself. Like, he would have been put out of business over this minute and very small thing. And it's probably because, the inspector was kind enough and wasn't an asshole. But I do know asshole inspectors that will close down your business over the smallest amounts of things. At least in my country. And this is why I don't like big government. This is why I don't like the EU with their massive regulations and stuff. Like, people say, well, how will you buy good bread if it's not for all these regulations? And my question is like, I don't know, man. How did my great-great-grandmother used to buy good bread without the wisdom of the European Union and all of the regulations there? Like, you go to the baker, and if it's a good product, people will go there. If he starts selling moldy bread or he starts selling a bad product, people find out and go somewhere else. And usually people who put out a bad product go out of business. Well, the people who put up a good product, they manage to expand and they manage to make a bigger business. You don't need all these regulations. And, like, I'm perfectly fine with some regulations that are common sense. But when you go to the point where you're not allowed to have like kilogram written with capital letters, and if for some reason it happens that you get a 25,000 euro fine, I think we need to take a step back and question, like, are some of these regulations really that important? So apparently the reason is because people might have been confused. Because you see, they might think that kilogram with capital letters refer to the measures of Kelvin and Gauss when combined. The capital K and G could easily be mistaken for the abbreviation of a Kommandigesellschaft business form. No, hold on, I can do this. All right? No, I can do this. Kommandite Gesellschaft. Kommandite Gesellschaft business form. There we go. Precisely what you'd expect to see on the price list on a bakery. Yeah. So when I see like 5 euros Kelvin, I think that's some hot bread. That's some hot shit. What type of person would actually confuse kilograms with kelvins? Huh? And if there is such a type of person, do we as a society have a duty to protect them? Or can we not assume that, these type of people that are so stupid, they would require to be placed under protection? Like, they would need to have a representative, because they clearly aren't smart enough to function in society. So maybe we should put them under some psychiatric ward, or give them some representative that can consent in their behalf, right? Like, so rather than pay the fine, the baker has conceded and wiped the capital letters from his blackboard, only lowercase cg from now on, he promises. The inspectors are right, the correct statement is required by law, he admits. but every office has discretion at which customer seriously thinks that I sell limited partnerships here. And like, I'm not blaming the inspector per se because he's applying the law. I'm blaming the lawmaker. That's the issue. And you look at the EU and they're actually deciding the length of the wick of a candle. Like every single thing in society, no matter how small it is, needs to be legislated somehow. And, when is it enough legislation? When can you say, like, this far, no further? But apparently the baker's decorations were not properly calibrated, you see. The blackboard was not where the inspector nitpick ended. They also took exception to a vintage set of scales, which displayed in his bakery for purely decorative purposes. Upon testing them, it was tested that unsurprisingly, they weren't properly calibrated. So the inspector therefore duly took note of the scale serial number and a few days later also issued the baker with a warning. So the guy had the set of scales as decoration, and apparently the decoration wasn't calibrated. Like, this is what happens in Germany, alright? And Germany is the heart of the EU. Do you understand why I don't like it? Do you understand why? Again, like, this is the small business owner. Like, this is the little guy. We're not talking about them going to Kaufland or to Carrefour or, to any of these supermarkets. No, we're talking about going to the little guy that managed to gather some cash, probably made a bank loan, probably put a mortgage on his house in order to open a family business. Right? That's the guy they want to fuck. So apparently they went a step too far, and the baker is refusing to remedy the defect and has in defiance set up a second vintage scale, this one even older and less calibrated, and serving no purpose other than looking old and vaguely cute. When the time comes for the next inspection, he's ready to have a fight with the fun police. Well, I think the fun police will win because the law is on their side. So, if they say that, well, how can we tell that you're not using the scale in order to measure the kilograms for the customer? Yeah. Berlin inspectors went overboard and beyond, and usually the remit of the State Office for Weight and Measurements is confined to testing, measuring instruments in retail and at petrol station meters, water, electricity, gas, as well as quality assurance in medical laboratories. A spokesman from the Senate Department of Economics, which controls the Office of Weights and Measurements, expressed amazement at the action taken by the inspectors. They said that this incident, especially the threat of such hefty fine, was exceedingly unusual, and they will be investigating. Yeah, this is what the lawmakers always do. Like, first they pass the ridiculous legislation, and they don't think about it. They will usually write like something that you need to write the measurements, and that is the law. So if the measurements are spelled with non-capital letters, you're not allowed to spell them with capital letters, and the inspectors might actually have the law on their side on this. So you have the lawmaker that doesn't really think about it, makes the law, and then he's the one astonished about the law that he made. And especially this happens in the European Union, where it takes like 5 to 10 seconds for them to cast a vote, and they don't even talk about the legislation. They just say the law and the number. So what happens is that the lawmaker actually has a couple of aides, people that help him, and they're the ones that are supposed to read the legislation the day before, and they're the ones that are going through it point by point, and then they just tell the lawmaker if you should vote or shouldn't vote on it. It often happens that even the lawmaker is unaware with what he voted. A perfect example is Alex Voss, not knowing that his copyright bill that he passed in the European Union was going to censor certain things like sports and other events. Because, again, like they're really unaware of the legislation they're passing. So you end up with situations like this, and it's the little guy that has to suffer. Let me know if you're from Germany. Let me know if this is something that you also encountered, especially if you're an entrepreneur or a small business person. Because here in my country, it's quite common. Like a lot of legislations like this, whenever the inspection comes in, they will usually find something to bitch and moan about, like something minuscule, and try to give you a fine. I'm not surprised that in Germany is the same situation, but again, like, tell me in the comment section if this is the case, especially if you're from America. I'm curious how Americans do things, because I definitely don't think it's similar to this. Because the Amerikanski actually love their entrepreneurs and actually understand that it's good for the consumer to promote the little business. so that the little business can grow into the big business in time, rather than make sure that you find them with 25,000 euros so that you get them to be bankrupt. And then the government doesn't even take the taxpayer money because, well, there's no one to take them from. Anyway, let me know what you think. See you guys tomorrow.